Hey everybody, welcome to Head to Head, a Star Wars show. So it looks like the Bad Batch, episode 7, called Battle Scars came out, and we're going to talk about it right now.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, Bad Batch, episode 7, called Battle Scars. What are your overall thoughts?
I really enjoyed this episode.
Versus
it
really,
was really,
really enjoyed it, or?
Yes.
I had to do it, man. I'm sorry.
I know. But no, this is a really great episode because there's a lot of emotion in this. Like there's a lot of emotional tugs and pulls, and there's a lot of depth in this, honestly. I really loved just the camaraderie. Of course, it's gotten deeper. In some cases, the stakes are a little bit higher, and there's still like this overarching, looming entity that's kind of like in weight, that's kind of there, that they feel it, but they don't really feel it. So we can see it there, but they can't. And so, it was really a really great episode for me. And of course, every time they throw a different surprise in there, a surprise character, it's always fun.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually agree with that. Pretty much almost verbatim, because there was a lot of emotion. I thought the comedy in this was really good, too. They had a lot of really, really good comedy. And it's something that I think, and I've said this, I think on virtually every single review that we've done, they do the comedy really well in this show. Mm-hmm. I think they actually do it better in this show than even the Clone Wars and perhaps even the films.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the comedy is really awesome. It's definitely Star Wars comedy, it's Star Wars humor. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those things, once again, testament to Dave Filoni and Favreau, just really understanding, but more so Filoni because this is more his thing. But this is just, once again, just a testament to his knowledge of Star Wars. And, the more Star Wars stuff this guy does, he keeps getting better. I mean, you look at the Clone Wars season 1, it's like, okay, you don't really know. It's good. But then like the next season keeps getting better. And then the next season after that. And then like by the time even when you get to season 7, when they took that hiatus and came back to it, it was awesome. And so once again, the action, the story, the comedy, all of it's there.
That's actually a good point. I didn't think about it, but one of the things that I think you definitely see is that Filoni just gets better and better and better as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like you said, I think the biggest example of that was between season 6. Well, I'm not even going to count season 6 of the Clone Wars because I think that was a little bit, they basically threw that together. That wasn't really an official proper, I'm going to say that. It was not a proper season 6. But if you just take season 5, and then even some of the episodes that were in season 6, and then you compare that to season 7, and like you said, there was enough time that had passed, Filoni definitely grew as a writer and as a producer, because it was stunning, the difference between your 5 and 6 and then your season 7 in that show. And I think that's being reflected very much in the Bad Batch. I think that's actually one of the strengths of this show, is the fact that you are now dealing with a seasoned Dave Filoni, and you're seeing the results of all those years studying under George Lucas, all those years then producing the show on his own, and then of course he had Rebels, which was another step up. And I think that you can see there's a definite growth, and it's reflected in the quality of these episodes. I have to agree. I think the emotional depth, I think that when you look at just the character development even, I think it's a pretty big, monumental step. And
oh yeah, I mean, and especially when you look at Mandalorian too, add that in there too. That's his first live action. So he's taken all this experiences, and that's what's really making him a true Star Wars I guess kind of conduit, really, is because he's got all this experience now and he's bringing it all to us in various mediums, and it's just knocking it out the park every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, let's get into this now. Let's get into actually what season 7 was about, and then start breaking it down and talking about things that we liked, and if there was anything that we didn't like. I mean, speaking for myself, I don't really think that there was anything I didn't like in this episode.
Yeah, me either. I mean, I think this is one of those kind of really good and really complete episodes. It's also one of those episodes I didn't want to end. I wanted to like already be in the next episode already, like kind of a binge watch. Normally I can like, all right, that was a cool episode. I'll wait to the next one.
Right.
But this one, it was kind of like, man, I really want to see like the next, the next thing.
Yes, because the thing about these guys, and I think the thing about the whole overall story arc of this, is the fact that when they actually ended on the type of cliffhanger that they did, it definitely plays into the greater story, and I think that you actually really want to see what's going on. You want to see, well, wait a minute, this is all good, but now I want to see what happens after this.
Right. Exactly. And once again, it's funny because, neither one of us really wanted this particular show.
Right.
We didn't really want to see the Bad Batch per se. I mean, we thought they were cool, but we didn't really feel like there was a need to really keep following them. But now you kind of see like, no, I love this, and I love these characters.
Not even just, and I think that what we were basing this on was just what we knew of the Bad Batch at the time before the show. Because again, they were hinted upon, especially in season 7. That's really where you see them in their current form, is season 7 of the Clone Wars. And I think that you definitely see these characters, and that there is something there that could be a story. But at the same time, I think you and I, based on that, really didn't care that much. Like, it was interesting, but it's like, I don't know. But when you actually see the show, and you see that where it's framed around, and I've said this even before, that my interest in this show is really going to be the framing around it. The fact that we're seeing the Empire for the first time.
You're absolutely right. That's the absolute key to this show. And it's just like we're able to understand what's going on through the eyes of these particular characters who we like anyway. I mean, like I said, we saw them in season 7. They were cool. So it's like you just take some cool characters that everyone liked, but you have this greater story that surrounds them, but yet affects them at the same time.
Right.
That's what makes this magic.
I gotta say, I've become invested in the characters themselves, that now I actually would follow them based on just them, even though I would still definitely say that I think I'm more invested in the world and the environment that they're in right now and the circumstances. And like you said, that we're being told about the beginnings of the Empire and all these things that are going to lead up to the original trilogy. I just was watching Rogue One last night. And again, I forgot how good that movie. I still say that is the best of the Disney era Star Wars films.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that.
But again, it makes me really excited to see the rest of the Bad Batch, because we're leading up to this. And then, of course, it also made me really excited for the Andor series. So the cool thing about this episode is it opens up, because there's a couple of different ways that Star Wars likes to handle its episodic TV. One is a slow burn, and the other one is almost, it kind of reminds me of like a Revenge of the Sith type of vibe, where it opens up and they're in this, instant action. And that's what I was going to say. It's basically an instant action, and in this case, they're instantly in this space battle type of thing. And, it just, right out of the gate. And it's funny because at first, when they were talking about the whole, like, stolen lizard thing or whatever, I'm like, man, I thought they resolved the whole Rancor thing. And then I realized, no, it's yet another one. I'm like, what are these guys, like zoological detectives or what? Because it seems like all their missions now are based on go and capture some sort of an animal.
Right. They're like pest control all of a sudden.
Right. Like they're the Orkin of, the galaxy or whatever. By the way, Ronaldo and Joanne join us. And I'd like to welcome everybody else that's on right now because we do have a good amount of viewers, which is always good. But yeah, I thought that it was one of those things that it was interesting to me because at first it really confused me. Like I wasn't really sure what was going on, and then I clued in on the fact that no, this is another job that Sid basically sent them on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so it kind of opens up with that. Of course, this lizard thing gets loose and it kind of attacks Wrecker.
Which, of
And
course, always does the whole comedy. There's always room for comedy when something happens. And again, I don't necessarily think that it's overdone. I think a lot of people could actually say this opening was a little bit, where it ventured a little bit too much into a kid show type of a thing.
yeah,
But I don't
it did.
necessarily,
But
it did, but I don't necessarily think that I don't think it was overwhelming.
no, it wasn't. I mean, it definitely had those childlike, overtones, but it didn't take you out of it though. I think that's the
No.
key thing. It's like it was just enough of a kid thing, where Omega's got to put the little hamper thing back on the little lizard and kind of trap it again.
Yeah, but if you
But
think about
you know,
this though, and this is a response that I would give to anybody that said, "Oh, it's going into a little bit more kid show territory." I was like, "Okay, let a spider loose in your living room and watch what happens, or a mouse,
or a huge spider at that.
either a huge spider or a mouse or something, or maybe a raccoon gets in the house. I don't know. Watch the reaction of everybody. It's going to be pretty
Yeah,
much
exactly.
like that."
Exactly. Oh yeah, I mean that's the cool thing. I mean it's very realistic. That's why I feel like it didn't take me out of it.
Hmm.
But it's funny because you got like this big, huge hulking guy. That's what makes it funny is because like Records is always about destroying crap and whatever, and he's like fearless. So to see him like freaking out by this thing is kind of like that was just what made it funny. Um, but yeah, so they kind of complete that mission. They bring the lizard back to Sid. Everything is good. She brings up the fact that they screwed up that whole tactical droid mission that they had, and so now she's starting to kind of talk to them about the money and stuff. She's like, well, look, I'm not running a charity here. You guys, things cost money. So you guys are using the fuel. You guys are, got lodging. You guys got. So she's itemizing like.
Yeah, I thought that
all their
was
stuff.
really cool, actually, because this is the first time that you see that kind of thing in Star Wars. But yeah, these are very realistic things because at first it was confusing to me because they were basically going, well, why is our cut so low? And she was like, well, my cut is this. And I thought it was just another case of, hey, I found the jobs. You guys are lucky to be making any money with the heat that's on you right now. But she turned that around. It was like, no, this isn't about me being, pretty much like a gangster.
Shady.
Yeah, or shady or whatever. This is me about, look, you guys are racking up expenses that I have to pay for, which I thought was awesome when they had that popcorn looking stuff or whatever. The Wrecker and Omega, I guess, have a tradition after a job is over, which I also thought was really cool. Yeah, like each
and
mission.
that's one of those emotional pulls that they had.
Endearing kind of things. But I liked how they slipped in there, hey guys, that's going to be whatever. And they're like, yeah, put it on Sid's tab.
Right.
Just kind of easing in that whole thing,
But it also kind of reinforces the fact that, these guys, they're clones. So they're so used to Republic being the overseer. I mean, they never had to worry about this stuff because the Republic took care of it.
They were always taking
the
care
military. Yeah, so now like they have to do this for themselves, and now they're saying like, oh, this is what the Republic basically had to do for us, but we just never saw it because the Republic is so huge and they ran everything and they had so much money. They didn't think about it, but now you're starting to see like, okay, look, how much fuel does it cost? And you got to think about like the fuel it costs to fuel just one of their little shuttles. These guys are flying around these huge cruisers, man. They're like, and you got to keep all these, fighters fueled up and repairs. And I mean, it's costing a lot of money. So, that was just really cool to kind of see that aspect of Star Wars.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought that it was one of those things that, and you weren't really beaten over the head with it either. They brought it up.
But it's just, Nice reminder.
Yes. And I think that it's a plot point that's not usually introduced really in a lot of franchises. I mean, maybe with Star Trek they'll do some of that stuff because there's always about them needing more resources and things like that, and they have to figure things out. But again, even that's the Federation. See, we always work Star Trek into every one of our shows somehow. But this was, like you said, more of an economical thing. And these guys, being clones, are used to they were basically the military. So they're used to being taken care of by the government because that's who they are working for. And now they're finding out that, no, everything costs money. And they're also looking at the switch of the economy, right? It's going from the Republic, which is probably a little bit less totalitarian. And now you have this fascist regime that's come in, and they're implementing all this stuff. And I think it's really cool to see how the clones are dealing with it. And again, it was kind of like you brought up earlier. We're seeing how the entire galaxy is dealing with it, but more or less through the clones' point of view.
Right. So then, as this is kind of going on, there's a scuffle that's going on between, I forgot the snail-looking creature, what species that is. But
you're talking about the hammerhead-looking thing?
Yeah.
It's like a Icthorian or something like that.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I never even really knew that. I think they ended up revealing that either after the original trilogy was made, because obviously that figure was just called Hammerhead. It wasn't like that was that character's name. It was just, that's basically what he looked like. And I think it was around the time of the prequels that they actually gave a name to that species. But it's something like that.
Yeah, so he kind of gets into it with this whole mystery character, that's sitting in his spot pretty much. And he's, irritated that the mystery character is not really giving him any type of response.
Ronaldo says Ithorian. Ithorian.
There we go. I knew he would know.
Yeah, of course.
So, then of course there's blaster fire. And then of course Sid kind of goes over to see what the heck is going on along with the rest of the batch. And that's when we come face to face with our old friend Rex.
So now, did Rex you think that was a Jedi at first?
No, I didn't think it was a Jedi. Honestly, I thought that was Fennec Shan.
Oh, that's actually a good point. I didn't really think about that, but
yeah, I thought that was Fennec.
I wasn't really sure who that was going to be. I thought it could either be that. I thought maybe it was going to be revealed to be an Inquisitor of some sort. I did not guess Rex, though.
No, I didn't guess Rex at all. So that was cool. I was like, oh, wow, they brought him in, and that was cool. And, even watching him, how he just interacted with those guys and, how he's beloved. And that just shows you, like, just how beloved Rex was. Like, Rex is pretty much beloved by everybody. And then, of course, once Wrecker and Omega come in and, Omega sees Wrecker just run over to him and pick him up and, be Wrecker, and of course Omega's kind of confused. Like, I thought you guys really didn't like the Reds.
Exactly. Because in the first episode, they got into that whole fight in the cafeteria, and you saw a little bit of the segregation between the regular ones versus these more outcast type clones, which I thought was a really cool thing that they introduced in this too. But yeah, this shows how somebody like Rex, probably because he was so high up and he was considered to be a hero, but the point is, there was a prior relationship there, and there are certain times where people tend to rise above these petty differences. Definitely. So I thought that was cool that they basically put that in there.
Yep. And then so they have this whole exchange, and he's like, no, we like this one. This one is really cool. And, Omega goes over to meet him, and she notices that he's a first generation clone. And that's when Rex is kind of like, how did you know that? It's like, oh, I can tell by the lines in your face. And so this kind of gives me a glimpse once again right there. It's like, I feel like this is kind of delving into Omega's
I got the same exact vibe, because they were making a little bit of a, hey, I've never seen a clone like this before. And yeah, they made a moment out of it. Now, it does The thing is, though, it does kind of make sense from the standpoint of
It does.
she's just meeting him, and it would make sense that there would be that natural curiosity. But the thing is, she's been around because she was a Camino. She's been around clones all her life.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily think that it would be like some, a mystery or whatever. I mean, Rex to her it would be, because I think we all kind of took a little bit of a step back when she's like, oh no, I'm a clone too. And we're like, really? You don't look a whole lot like Django to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit of a gender thing, but I got the same exact vibe as you did, man. I thought, okay, there's some meaning here. They're setting something up that we're going to actually see down the line somewhere, because they're making a little bit too big of a deal about that.
Right. So, so that was cool. And, you kind of see that, yes, Rex is one of the original clones. And so that also explains why he's so good and why he's kind of like you said, so revered. Is because he's only one of the first batches off the line. So he's got the closest blood or the stronger connection to Django himself. So.
Right. And I'm trying to, now Cody was more the guy that Obi-Wan was working with. And Rex, if I remember, was more like under Anakin, right? Wasn't he the main clone that was under Anakin? Because every Jedi general had some battalion. Yeah, they all had a commander. And I remember Rex was his, Cody was Obi-Wan's. There's a couple other ones, actually, that they had named or whatever that I can't remember offhand. But I thought that was interesting that it was Rex and not Cody.
Well, yeah, I mean, but Rex, I think... See, Cody was under the whole Order 66 thing. That's the thing.
Oh, right.
He actually followed Order 66.
I had to go back. Yeah, I just had an inhibitor chip moment here. That's right. Because Rex with Ahsoka, that was one of the things that I thought was cool too, when they were talking about the inhibitor chip, and he was like, yeah, I couldn't even resist it or whatever. And it sort of referenced that whole moment.
Situation.
Yeah, that whole situation with Ahsoka. And it's referencing season 7 of the Clone Wars, which I thought was also cool, that the Bad Batch really is not just a spinoff of the Clone Wars, but also a continuation. Which, of course,
definitely,
naturally, it's going to be, because, I mean, look, this is all part of a greater timeline, and all these shows are just taking place during different eras. But
yeah. So, they kind of have this whole conversation, and then they kind of realize, Rex kind of eventually realizes that,
it was because, remember, Wrecker basically started with this whole headache thing again, which I'm glad they finally were dealing with this, because as soon as he started saying that, well, we knew that anyway.
I knew it was going to come to a head. No pun intended.
Oh. You know what? I'm going to let that go. I'm letting it go. This is me letting that go.
That one go.
But basically, yes, I think that it's one of those things where if you look at the buildup, you knew that they weren't going to carry it on forever. But like you, though, if you remember, like the last couple of reviews we did, we thought that maybe they were going to deal with that for the season finale or something.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know when they were going to address it, but I knew that it had to be addressed because, at first it was like, okay, he just got a little headache because he wonked his head on something. But then, like, no, it kept happening like every episode, and then it kept getting worse for him. Like, yeah. So I was like, okay, this is definitely like the whole inhibitor chip thing.
Right,
and then,
they're trying to
start talking to himself.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, it was one of those things that's like, come on, man, and you knew, in Rex's presence, as soon as they brought that up, it's like, okay, something's going to be up with this.
Yeah. And so he kind of like, well, yeah, you guys haven't had your chips taken out. And that's when Rex is kind of like, oh, you haven't? He slowly starts like reaching for that blaster.
Doing like, little Han Solo, under the table, kind of reaching for the blaster thing. Oh, you haven't had your inhibitor chips. And what was funny about that was, that went from this whole warm greeting between friends. I mean, that turned very quickly, man.
It escalated quickly. It really escalated quickly.
Oh, you haven't had your inhibitor chip taken out. Yeah, let me just reach for my gun. And it's just I mean, even
that's
though they
like,
didn't do the whole like guns blazing thing, I thought it was really funny though how the whole mood of that conversation just like that.
yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like, all right, and then of course, Hunter and everybody's like, whoa, chill,
Yeah, right.
it's cool, like,
Like, hey man,
relax,
we're kind of on the
we're on
outside.
this,
They don't seem to be affecting us. But you know what's
yeah,
weird
we're
about
good.
that though? Let me ask you
Hmm.
this. And this goes out to all you guys. And by the way, Ronaldo, I know you guys have been chatting. The way that we're starting to handle these shows now is that Daryl and I are going to talk for a while, and then we're going to go and we're going to deal with some of the chats. That's where it's a little bit different from Friday's show. Friday's show, we'll just keep rolling them like through the whole thing. But for Monday, we'll at certain points turn to the chat. So I know you guys are chatting. Keep chatting. This is great. Can't wait to get to those. But I want you to answer this one for me first, and certainly you guys can too. And that is, when they were doing this whole thing and they were talking about, oh, he's got the headache, he's got the inhibitor chip and all that. Did you actually think that with the way that they were dealing with the chip, did you actually think that it was going to, be handled in the way that it was handled? Because it
Yeah.
was kind of weird to me that, first of all, only Wrecker was actually having any symptoms from this thing.
Hmm.
The other guys weren't, but the other guys are kind of acting like, yeah, we know the inhibitor chip. It's not a big deal. We'll just do whatever. And of course, Rex is like, no, you don't understand. We have to get this out now. Right.
Hmm.
So it kind of makes me wonder, because them being outsiders, and obviously the inhibitor chip isn't working on them, I'm wondering if going forward, now that they got it out of them, but are we going to see this in more clones? Is it going to be some more? I'm really not sure how I'm trying to frame this. I had it actually before, but
So are you saying, like, are we going to see the effects of the inhibitor chip through other clones that might be still
yeah,
around?
I mean, I guess that would be a good way of putting it, sure, because this thing is still in all these clones, and obviously it's having these continue, because everybody assumed that up until now, Order 66 was, okay, you all go kill the Jedi, and we're the Empire now, and then we're all good. And then they more or less return to normal. But what they're implying, especially in this episode, is like, no, this is kind of an ongoing thing.
Yeah, I mean, the inhibitor chip really was kind of like one. It was a thing for Palpatine to kind of all at once just communicate to all the clones. It's like a mass
like a
email
reply
or something.
all kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like a mass email that just went out to everybody. Or as we would say in our old jobs, all district email. Yeah, so it's one of those things that kind of just sends out to everybody, and everybody kind of gets the same message at the same time, basically, and you just know what to do. But I think what made this whole situation was because honestly they didn't have, and I'm wondering is it because they are defective clones, it's not working properly, like because the mechanism is not responding to their neural center as well, because of the fact that they are defective.
Well, that's a good point too, because they basically have implied like, okay, the chip's not working on us, but you see what it's doing to Wrecker, where it's not.
See, the thing was,
it's like malfunctioning.
Wrecker, his whole thing was because he was fine until he bumped his head in that battle.
Right.
That's kind of what kind of triggers like some weird synapse happen, and then it didn't click all the way. So he's kind of like in between stages. But see, the thing is with Crosshair though, Crosshair is always kind of was like that anyway. He's always kind of like one of those follow orders kind of guys.
Yeah, he's like the Obi-Wan of the Bad Batch, basically.
Exactly. However, when his actually kind of switched on, his actually went live, like everybody else's, but his even kind of he was even struggling with his a little bit. It didn't just cut on like that.
Yeah, exactly. It basically was one of those things
progressive thing.
Right. It kind of worked on him a little bit, but there's definitely levels of susceptibility though between these guys.
And I think that's because they're defective. I think that's because that's part of their genetic code is that it's not responding as well to the chip as it would a reg, basically.
Well, I think that this goes into Rex's point though, whereas most of those guys are like, look, because we're defective, the chip doesn't really work on us. And Rex's point was, well, it hasn't worked on you yet, but you don't know what's going to trigger it. I mean, look at what happened to Wrecker, a bump in the head, and now he's kind of back and forth,
he's
right?
battling.
Starts out with some headaches, and, as we see later, it's going to escalate a little further. But one of the things, I want to point this out, one of the things that I thought was cool, and I haven't played the Jedi Fallen Order game, but I am aware of this. So Rex basically says, okay, there's this junk planet called Braca that we got to go to. That was one of the Easter eggs that was put in there. Of course, they mentioned Corellia, but a lot of people understand that reference. Right. Braca is actually the tutorial planet or first level that's in Jedi Fallen Order. And in fact, that planet was created specifically for that game. And so I thought it was really cool that they kind of put that into this thing.
Okay.
Because not only is it a cool Easter egg for fans, but I think it's showing, there's a couple of things that I think it's doing. From the business perspective, I think Disney's like, okay, for people that maybe started to play the game and they haven't finished it or whatever, people are going to watch this and get all warm and fuzzy about Brock and go, maybe I should go back and finish that game. Or maybe I should go back and play it again. It's a tie-in. But I think the other thing that it does that's really cool to me is that, once again, it's bringing together the continuity of this universe and the franchise. Because things that are mentioned in books are now brought up in the movies and the shows. And I think that more than anything is the strength of where they're going now with Star Wars, where we didn't see that before. Even in the early days of Disney, it almost looks like when they decided, hey, you know what? We didn't plan for a lot of this stuff and we made a lot of mistakes. This is their course correction.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that was cool. I didn't know that prior to, and you just told me just now, so that was awesome. But yeah, I mean, that whole kind of shipyard planet though was kind of interesting.
It was a cool planet, and basically what it is it's like a landfill, and that's why they assume that the Empire's not going to find them there, that it's a safe place to do this whole let's remove the inhibitor chip thing. Yeah, because of the nature of that planet.
So, yeah, they eventually head out to Braca, and they kind of make the decision like, okay, we got to get this taken out. Of course, Wrecker's not the least bit happy about this, because he's like, look, you guys gonna be cutting over my head.
When he was like, yeah, my headache's gone now. I think I'm good.
No, the funny thing is, she's like, well, what about Omega? She's like, well, I don't have an inhibitor. She's like, hey, that's not fair. Why does she
exactly right? And how do we know? How does she know she doesn't have one? That was the first thing, honestly, that popped in my head. It's like, well, I don't have an inhibitor chip. I'm thinking, well, the clones all would have said that too. They didn't know. It's like, how do you know?
But so I think once they land on Braca, they kind of see those kind of little patrol guys up there, kind of like watching the landfills and stuff like that. And, they were trying to stay out of sight from dealing with those guys. So they kind of climb aboard one of the Jedi cruisers and whatnot, looking for this stuff. And, they had to kind of scale this whole, they had to kind of go across this whole little valley or cliff thing that's within the ship. Of course, everybody makes it across. Wrecker is kind of like, I'm not too keen on, he doesn't like heights. One, so we've
Well, the thing
learned
that's
that
funny
already.
about this, I don't know about you, but this gave me flashes of Rey when she was doing the
It
scavenging the
did.
ship thing.
It did,
That's
definitely.
kind of what it reminded me of. And once again, I think a lot of this was to tie things in together, that this is how it works. I like the fact that they had to fight to really. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've seen this a million times in Clone Wars. And just once, just one time, I would like to see them just land the ship and be able to walk freely in and to where they need to go. However, I
Yeah.
understand that that wouldn't necessarily be realistic, though. And I do like the fact that they add that stuff. Like in the movies when Rey has to scavenge, old
Hmm.
ships or walkers or whatever it is, it's showing you the scope of how big these things really are and how dangerous this kind of work is if you're a
Oh
scavenger.
yeah,
And I think that it's
definitely.
really cool that they did that. So that part I thought was cool.
So Wrecker is going across, and his, the weight of him on this little rope didn't hold up too well, so he almost gets eaten by this weird thing. It almost kind of looks like a sarlacc, a water sarlacc, in a way.
Either the water sarlacc or it reminded me a little bit of some of the things that we see in the High Republic series.
Yeah, the Dringir.
Yeah, kind of Drangir, even though the Drangir kind of have it's more of a plant type of thing, but it kind of had
It's a
that
plant
vibe
thing.
to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. So they rescue Wrecker from there, and then they finally get into the medical bay. And they get into the medical bay, and but you just think that most of this stuff would have just been damaged, and especially like the war. I mean, granted, the war just happened, but this probably got to be in a few, like a 1 or 2 years in between this stuff, maybe. So, you know, but I do love the fact that um, Tech basically says, this isn't the most sterile environment to really do this type of operation, and then Rex is like, "Would you like to do it on the Camino?" Nope, here's fine.
Yeah, that
So I
was
mean,
good. And that is true.
yeah,
There is that trade-off,
yeah.
and
It's
again,
like,
it's yet another example of the humor really taking over, that it's
mhm.
something that they constantly watch and they constantly monitor, and they don't overdo it. That's what I like about it.
Yeah.
But of course, we have the
So,
inevitable.
yep. So now we have, Rex. I mean, Wrecker is kind of having the headaches are getting worse for him. He's really going through this. Tech is kind of like trying to analyze some things. He's kind of got this little device on his head, and he's trying to kind of pinpoint where the issue is with Wrecker. And then Wrecker finally snaps.
Yes. Now,
And
I have to say that I get it. I understand it. It makes sense. But it is an overused thing to me. That right at the moment, okay, we're going to do this, then he ends up snapping and they have to deal with the fallout from that.
mhm,
Just once, what I would like to see is either they do it beforehand, like when they're on their way to the thing,
mhm,
or I would like to see it maybe happen, maybe not at all.
mhm.
Maybe they just successfully remove the chip.
Yep.
It's almost like when the heroes take the final step to safety and then something blows up.
Mhm. Or would have been cool is actually if they fix Wrecker, either like they thought they fixed it but they didn't,
Now that would have been cool.
or
That
or
Yes, that would have been cool.
or when they do fix him, let's say Hunter decides to go off, and Hunter being the leader and almost like one of the better fighters, like him getting loose would have been like, okay, now you got Echo, Tech, and Wrecker trying to stop him, and
Well,
that would have
another
been.
one, which kind of almost splits the difference. So Wrecker's the one that has all the headaches, and they've been building this up.
Mhm.
What if Wrecker's never goes off, and then Hunter's goes off? Like complete
Right. That's what.
misdirection. See, that would have been cool.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, I mean, either way,
So.
I get it. I know they had to do it for this reason. I understand. It's not
Mhm.
that I don't But again, I think it's an overused storytelling device sometimes.
I got you. So at this point, Wrecker is going berserk. He's flipping tech over everything. Rex and them try to stop him, and he's just kind of going berserk. Um, Eventually, Omega kind of shoots him, and now he's chasing her, throughout this thing, and she's kind of running from her life. It's kind of like one of those. Now it turns into like a slightly horror movie, where now he's like Jason Voorhees, like stalking her, trying to find out where she is. And of course, they're trying to talk to Wrecker. They're trying to talk him down and talk him out of it, but he can't really do anything about it. And so, of course, all that ensues. And right before, once again, another common storytelling thing is right before Wrecker is about to like basically pound Omega into oblivion. Rex shows up at the right moment and stuns him. Then they get him on the table, and they actually do the operation. Now, here's the thing, though, is that like I didn't think, I was like, they did the operation, it was successful, but Wrecker didn't wake up initially.
Now that I thought
so
was cool.
I thought that was cool
because because
that was an added thing. I was like, oh, they didn't really plan for that.
Now you're adding a little bit of dramatic tension into that.
Yeah, which allowed a lot of emotional things, especially to see that, there's like, well, look, why don't you take Omega topside and let her get us some air? And she's just like, no, I'm almost like a wife. She's like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm sitting right by his side. She pulls up a chair and just sits there and holds his hand. And, while everybody else is asleep, she's basically still like not giving up hope. Because that's like, and you really start to see the relationship between Omega and Wrecker. Before it was like Omega and Hunter, they had their bond, but now you're seeing their, like, Wrecker's like the fun uncle basically for her.
Yeah, and I think that's
like,
what they
Hunter's
were
like
establishing in the beginning when she was eating the space popcorn, right? They were trying to show some of that bond between Wrecker and Omega. And what I like too, which actually steps a little bit away from the cliched stuff, which they did kind of allude to, but not strongly, is that usually you get a kid like that, they're going to bond with one person on the team. And it looked like Hunter was going to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you're right in the sense of she's actually bonding with all of them, but just in different roles. Hunter's more like the father. Yeah. The fun, cool uncle would be, Uncle Wrecker.
Yep.
So there's like different, and she has her relationship with Tech and Echo as well.
I think as this grows too, I think we're going to continue to see more of those other two, like Tech and Echo. I think we're going to see more of those, because I think
absolutely
Echo is more protocol, so he's kind of like more, because he's like a former. Well, I mean, he's a former soldier, so he kind of has that in him. But at the same time, he's kind of got this whole droid thing going on with him too. So he's kind of more protocolish. But Tech is he's kind of cool, but just smart. He's just really smart. So I think she's going to learn a lot from Tech.
Yeah,
just how to fix stuff, how to deal with things.
Right, the whole educational, intellectual side's more than likely going to come from Tech.
Yeah. So she's there. She's holding Wrecker's hand. Wrecker eventually wakes up, and that was a kind of a tender thing too, And then he wakes up, and he's asking like, "Oh, why the long face?" And he's kind of like still being his joking self. Of course, everyone else wakes up, and it's kind of like a big rejoicing party type thing.
Which is another thing that I like too, by the way, is the fact that usually when they wake up, it takes them a little while to get back to who they used to be, or you'd have that episode where we got to get Wrecker back in his right mind. I'm glad they basically just like, okay, the chip's gone, we're all good.
Yeah,
this is cool.
Yep. And I really, really love the whole the tender moment that they had, like when Wrecker kind of realized, like, yeah, I gotta address the fact that I almost killed you, kid. Like, I didn't want to. I tried my best. He felt so bad, and that was one of those moments where you really didn't. Yeah, he really didn't want to. It was something that you really Wrecker couldn't control, but at the same time, it's so unlike him to really be kind of like a truly apologetic.
That's
And you
true.
saw that in him. Like you really saw him. Like, if he breaks something, he's like, oops, sorry. He's
Yeah,
kind of
he
like,
was actually sorrowful. This was something
yeah,
that really
that meant a
it
lot to
bothered
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really bothered him, and he didn't know how to really get it out, but he was really trying, and he was kind of just like at a weird loss for words. And then the fact that, like, she didn't judge him. She understood that it wasn't you. And the fact that she just kind of kept this popcorn. It's like, well, you did it. You got the chip out. The mission's complete. Here's your popcorn. And I thought that was just so cool.
That was
the moment.
Probably one of my favorite moments of this show.
Yeah. That was the
and
moment.
Remind
right
me
there.
of that when I say, hey, what are your favorite moments of this episode? Or whatever, when we're recapping. But just spoiler alert, that was actually because that was so cool and that was so unexpected.
Yeah.
And it said so much, even though it was
with almost with no words,
right?
Was
right.
needed.
It was a very Spartan type of a scene, but man, it said so much on an emotional level. I mean, it said more than an entire expository scene could have said.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we come to the cliffhanger ending.
Yeah. So now we see that, most of everybody now has some time has passed. So now you see everybody kind of like, everybody's got that little Band-Aid on their side of their head, from their chip being removed.
The little vaccine patch, as I like to call it. Little stickers. I've had my inhibitor chip removed or whatever.
Chip removed. Right.
Then they're going to post on social media,
Right, exactly.
Then they're going to have the profile picture. It'll have that frame, chip removed.
So at the very end of this thing, it was another really cool moment too, though, like with Hunter and Rex, standing outside, and they just kind of had that conversation of, man, I see you haven't given up the fight. And it's like, no, I can't stop now at this point. And, they kind of have that, they definitely have that really good mutual respect for each other and love for each other. And, even it's kind of reminded me of I thought they were going to do like the Few Good Men thing at the very end. Cause when he called him Captain, he's been calling him Rex the whole episode.
It's true.
But at the very end, he called him Captain. And then,
well, you said, he called him Captain.
Well, he probably called it like at the very beginning.
It was when Rex was about to pull the gun on him. It was kind of like, Captain, what are you doing? Or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it might have been.
A highly emotional moment to be sure. I mean, I'm not going to, this is the first like calm thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Almost like Few Good Men. Attention. There's an officer on deck or whatever.
On deck. Yep. So,
it's like,
he's kind
new
of
clones, Loudon and Downey. My apologies to anybody that didn't see A Few Good Men, because you'll be totally lost at this moment.
Right. But so they kind of have their whole thing about, where to find each other, and if you need us for anything, we'll be there for you, and just having that type of, once again, that clone brotherhood.
But man, you know what? That is just so cliched. I mean, I get it. They got to do it. It's like in every war movie. I think it's like in script writing class, they tell you that you have to do this in every single thing that's produced that's like this. And I'm not saying that it's not entirely unrealistic either, because that's probably why it's in every movie that you see, because that's probably what would happen in real life that way. Mm-hmm. But
you ever served in an infantry unit?
I just wish they would, I just wish they would do it differently. Maybe that's it. And again, I mean, these are mild criticisms of, even though in the beginning I think, well, there's nothing I really don't like, and now I'm, trashing some of the stuff. But again, I wouldn't even say that I don't like it. It's just, there's things that I'm tired of seeing, but yet they fit so well in the context of this show, and in particular this episode, that they don't really necessarily bother me. They bother me more on a macro level than they do when you're actually critiquing, say, an episode. Right. Because when you really put yourself, and this is what I always ask people to do whenever they watch anything Star Wars related, especially if it's well done, put yourself in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll actually get a lot more out of it.
Definitely.
Come on, man. Get to the cliffhanger part. I want to get to these
So,
chats.
so then now, after that is all said and done, while they're kind of having this conversation, Rex walks away. And that's when we realize our heroes are being spied on by the I guess the little patrol cars or patrolmen, at the junkyard. And then he's like, "Yep, we found some people here. Alert the Empire." And so
Yeah, but
now,
it seemed like, now I don't know. And Ronaldo, I'm sure I'll correct me, but were they talking to a specific? You remember how
like a
Moff
shadowy
Gideon was
figure or something.
always talking to somebody specific. We just don't know who. And yeah, exactly. Like there's a shadowy figure that they're talking to specifically. Or were they just in general saying, hey, alert the Empire?
They were saying it in general because there was another person on the ship with them on the little platform thing that they were floating on.
Well, yeah, I remember there were two of them.
So he was just like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's confirmed that these are, I'm
yeah, but I thought that they said like, okay, alert the Empire. The other guy did, but was talking to somebody specific, and it wasn't just like some officer they got on the phone. It was like somebody specific that was looking for them. Because I'm really curious.
So.
Well,
but I mean, I'm sure it's probably,
Well, it could be Tarkin. It could be who's a guy under him. The other guy.
Yeah, the little guy who. Yeah, that's his name. The other guy.
Right. The other guy. Exactly. Could be him. It could be a lot of people, especially when you think of this time period. So I'm really curious on where they're going with that, because one of the things that they do in these shows, and this is where sometimes you can get really frustrated. Like they did this all the time in the Clone Wars. Like they'd have an ending like that, and you're like, sweet, setting you up for next week's episode. Then next week's episode comes, and it's the droids trying to find their way home or something stupid like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a misdirection kind of thing.
Yeah, they kind of want you to forget about it, and then they bring it back to you like, oh, yeah.
Right. Then you do like a previously on, whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah. Now I remember. So, it'll be really interesting to see. All right, so we're gonna get to some of these chats. Yeah. A lot of Ronaldo stuff here. So going back to the beginning, it says, I wonder how long they are staying with Sid. And that's actually a really good question, because I was wondering myself, is this show going to be set up? Because remember, this is going to go on for at least a few seasons. We don't really know how many yet, but we know it's going beyond season 1. So it becomes, is Sid going to be kind of like Charlie and Charlie's Angels, where they go and they get their next mission, and then they go, and is that going to be how this whole thing is being set up? Or is Sid maybe a seasonal story arc for just a season? Or is she going to be popping up and periodically, and maybe they're just doing the story arc to set it up, and then they'll get away from Sid, and then they'll pop back into Sid maybe 2 or 3 times in season 2. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think either one or two things is going to happen with Sid. One, it's going to be some heat that's going to come towards Sid, and she's going to have to tell them, you guys can't stay here because it's interrupting my business too much, and I don't need this type of heat here. Or she's going to betray them because the amount of money or trouble that she can get into by harboring them is too great.
Well, but you can look at that 2 different ways, though. On one hand, yes, she is taking a little bit of risk, but remember, she was also a Jedi informant for a long time. So there was some risk there, and the reward that she's getting, because she's getting all this stuff taken care of, where it's almost like she has her own private team now that she could just send out and not necessarily have to pay them that much, even though, as we said earlier in the episode, it's not like they're not incurring expenses, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like having your own little private strike force.
Yeah, but here's the difference, though. It's like, okay, when you have, at the time when she was a Jedi informant, like the Jedi were backed by the Republic. So you basically have the government
Well,
basically
yeah, okay. You're
supporting
backed
you.
by the government. Now you're not. Now you're on the. Now you're
Now
almost
the
like an
government is
informant for a criminal.
right now the government is after you now because
Yeah.
now it's the empire.
Yeah.
So now it's reversed now. So that's what I'm saying. Like I think that type of weight will be because if she got into any trouble, you know, she can hit up one of the Jedi or whatever. And of course, with them having the Force and every, I mean, you probably wouldn't feel threatened at all because it's like I got this superhuman, metahuman,
Well, that
basically
makes me
that's at
wonder.
my disposal.
But if she ever finds out that any of them are left, it makes you wonder if she could actually get any to maybe occasionally give a couple of protective type of thing. Not Luke, obviously, but maybe Ahsoka.
Well,
Or
I
maybe
mean,
the other ones
you
that
know,
are left. I mean, you know, like I've often said in all these shows,
mhm.
right? It's like you're led to believe, okay, the Luke Skywalker, the last of the Jedi you will be. And, you know, we watch it now and it's like, well, no, he's not. There's like 40 of these guys running around the galaxy somewhere.
Well, that's why I like the fact that they kind of dealt with that in episode 3 though. When Obi-Wan sent that message out to warn anybody
Yeah,
and
I
kind of
know.
like
I
let
was
everybody
kind of,
know.
that was a little
I
retconning. But
know.
even then, Rebels hadn't been created, like all this other stuff. I mean, there's so
But see
many
that
of
that
these guys.
and that's what allows that gives you that freedom of movement now because that was established in 3. Now you can have a Kanan walking around. Now you can have Ahsoka but they're just all in hiding now. Which to me
Right.
I think is cool either because I mean like, you know, every Jedi isn't military either. Like you got
No, I
some
know.
Jedi who are just force healers, you got people who just, you
Mhm.
know. So,
No, these
you
are all
know,
good points.
but I think Sid, like I said, I think for Sid though, it's going to be a situation either it's going to become too much pressure on her and her business, and she's got to like, look, you guys, the Empire's on your heels. They can't find out what I'm doing.
I don't.
You
The
guys got
only
to go.
way I would only. Well, okay, maybe eventually, but look, if she were that worried about him, she's not going to be sending him out to capture space lizards or something. I mean, think about that. That's a pretty trivial mission to send them out on if you're worried about heat.
Well, yeah, but up until then, they've been pretty, discreet though.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I mean, outside of Fennec Shan, which is like, okay, that's a pretty high person. I mean, somebody's paid some pretty good money to get to find you guys. But I'm good at keeping secrets now. But see, some things might come to a point where it may get too much for her. That's all
Oh,
I'm
you're
saying.
talking
Like
about
it
like
just,
maybe down the line or something?
yeah, I think like I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think that's what's going to cause. Because the question was,
I
how
just
long
don't
do you
think
think they're going to stay with Sid?
right,
I'm
but I mean,
like,
I just don't think she's that worried about it because if she's sending him out to find space lizards after Fennec Shan is known to be after them, meaning they've
mm-hmm.
got some sort of price on their head, seems like you would want to pick and choose a little bit where you send these guys out because she knows it's not like they're the most careful people in the world or discreet.
Well, I think they're, but see, I think she's sending them places that seems like more in the outer regions
Yeah,
area
yeah.
versus like and like you said, like the Empire is still building itself. So they're still they're kind of still more focused on building the Empire and changing everything over. If they catch them, they catch them. But it's kind of like we got
Yeah, well,
bigger
they
fish to
haven't
fry at
really
the moment.
given, right, they haven't given too many resources yet, which is
Right.
true. All right, so he also says, when I saw Rex with the whole hood thing, he gave me strong Aragorn vibes from the first Lord of the Rings movie. And yeah, that was the reason why I was a little bit, like I wasn't sure who it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because they did a really good job of throwing you out the trail because it could have been a Jedi. It could have just been, well, like what it was. Somebody that was just wearing this type of cloak that's a little bit nondescript. Says, for me, it was always an ongoing thing. If you look at all the post-Order 66 clones, they are all much more aggressive. So Ronaldo's talking about back when we were saying, was the inhibitor chip kind of like a one and done, or is it an ongoing thing? And that's true. That's actually a really good observation that I never really, I can't say I didn't notice it, but it was subconscious. Like I didn't really focus on that part. But it's true. They really were more aggressive after that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you really couldn't tell. I mean, and there really isn't a whole lot of medium. I mean, unless you're like reading the books or comics and stuff like that. But I mean, because for the most part, you're going from Order 66 to stormtroopers. You're not really dealing a whole lot.
Yeah, which is another thing that's really cool about this whole time period is the fact that because you're dealing with the transitional time, you get to see the aftermath of the clones.
Right.
Because you're right. Usually you go from Revenge of the Sith right to like Solo. And even Solo, as early as that is, it's still stormtroopers.
Yep. And
you're like, okay, well, what did all the clones do? And that's what's really cool about seeing this time period from their point of view. Then Ronaldo goes on to say, the Braca thing was super cool. As someone who has beaten the game, all right, not just played the game, beaten the game. Seeing the planet again felt so familiar. Well, guess what, Ronaldo? You're the guy that they put that little Easter egg in there for. You and all the people that have played the game. Because as I said before, I definitely think that some of it was to give people who have played the game or maybe didn't finish the game the warm and fuzzies. So it's like, yeah, you know what? Let me go. Other people might be asking around, and then some Star Wars geek like us is going to give that piece of information, and people are like, oh, really? And then they want to go out and buy the game. Which, it's probably only like $20 now. I haven't played it yet. I mean, I want to. What's funny is, I'm part of that PlayStation Plus thing where you get 2 free games a month. And one of the free games was Squadron.
Oh.
Yeah. I downloaded that. I haven't played it yet. But I was really surprised because that's relatively new. I mean, it only came out like a year or two ago. So, yeah. All right. So then Ronaldo goes on to say, the aquatic creature reminded me of that monster that almost ate Grogu in The Mandalorian. And that's true. That's true. And that monster actually sort of reminded me like of the Kraken or something. It was like this giant, crazy. I mean, let's face it. If any of us saw any of these things, we'd probably like die of shock. It would just be, if I saw something like that. Yeah, or even
especially that close too.
Yes,
like it'd be different if I saw something like that and I was so far away. It would freak me out. I could from a safe distance shoot at it or throw something at it or blow it up,
or just kind of.
But when
watch
you're like,
it.
But dangling like 12 feet in front of that thing, now,
Well, and the thing is, in the Star Wars universe, these guys are all like, oh, one of these again,
right.
Exactly. The way we would look at,
like
a
pit bull or something.
Yeah, right, or something weird like that. Then he points out, when we were talking about what if all these people went off, what if Tech went off? They would probably beat him quickly. And I would say, yeah, that exactly.
That depends.
It really depends.
Because of his because it's not just he's so technically savvy, although that's true. He's super intelligent in general. He kind of probably knows more about all of them than they do. And on top of it, depending on where he is and when he goes off, if he's like around a place that has a bunch of technology, he's about as dangerous as like Dom from Fast and the Furious around a Hemi Cuda or something like that. Like you can't almost stop him because the guy is super advanced and he can move really quickly. Now if they got a straight hand-to-hand combat, yeah.
Yeah, but see, Tech would know that he was beaten,
but Tech wouldn't put himself in that position.
That's my point. He would never put himself in that position because he would know, hey, listen, man, there's like no way in the world I'm going to win on this level. And he would basically just fight them another way. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about each of these guys is the fact that they all have their different attributes, their strengths, their weaknesses. And what's interesting is if they ever turned against each other, that's why I said if they did a whole thing to where, and again, I thought that they were going to carry on this whole Wrecker has a headache and his inhibitor chip thing. I thought they were going to carry that to the season finale and that he would snap and maybe possibly team up with Crosshair. I didn't want that to happen because I think it would have gotten a little bit too weird, but that is one of the possibilities. And if that had been the case, Now you have essentially like almost half the team against the other half, and they all know each other's strengths and weaknesses. So it would have been an interesting battle in that regard. Okay. Ronaldo also says there were a lot of cliche moments, but it was cool. And yeah, that's it. That's one of the things that I think is a really big strength about this series, too, is that even the cliched moments are either done in a way that's interesting or they just fit within the context of the show, so you don't question it as much. Then he goes on to say, wouldn't it be funny that there was an episode where Sid kicks them out of her place and calls it Revenge of the Sid?
Oh, my Lord. I think Ronaldo has joined us in the...
Well, Get Record has joined
the
us,
gallery.
and he says, oh my gosh, LOL. And I'm wondering if he's referring to that comment. Because, yeah, man, you've been saving that one up, Ronaldo.
Yep. Been working on that one all day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was, wow. But, hey, Get Record, how are you doing? We want to take the time to welcome everybody, actually, to the show. So, yeah, I think that that's just one of those things that what the show does right, I think that it does so right that it overshadows any of the minor little things that you can pick on where maybe it's wrong. And honestly, I wouldn't even say that anything that they do is necessarily wrong per se. I've gotten into discussions of this on our comment section. There's things about the show that people don't like, but it's usually just because of the nature of the show. They don't understand that there's so much depth to this show if you really stop and think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you allow yourself to get really involved and invested into the characters, and if you really allow yourself to kind of, like you said earlier, put yourself in some of these situations, these are the natural reactions that most people would have. And, you would kind of have that, response to it. And like I said, I think it's a great show. I think and like I said, once again, you have to also remember that this is only season 1. We're just getting to know these characters. You got to set up the story. Now, there may be an end game, maybe in season 4, season 5, where it gets way deeper, but we have to get to that point. But right now, we're still in season 1. And you have to allow these things to grow naturally without forcing everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like
too early.
24. Like 24, like we looked at season 1 to 24. It was like, oh, this is a really good season. When you look at season 5 of 24 compared to season 1, it's like it blows it out of the water.
Right.
But fact, looking at season 1 of 24, it was great. Though.
Yeah. When you actually watch season 1, and I remember watching it, it took a couple episodes, but I was addicted to it. By episode 3, I was addicted to it. But by the time you get to season 5, which is probably the high point of that show, when you try to go back and rewatch season 1, it's different.
It's different
because you're actually looking at everything in totality, and you have the benefit of hindsight at that point. And I've said a million times, we're still too early in this show to levy some of the criticisms that have been put on the show. And I think that that's one of the things that I think I'm looking forward to the most, is where this show is going to go, even to the end of the season. Because like I said, this storyline is what I thought would be the season finale. Now, I know I asked this on every 12. Review of this. Thank you. He knew exactly what it was I was going to ask. It's awesome. So it is 12 episodes.
Yep.
Right. So
we're just over the halfway mark.
We're just over the halfway mark. And so there's still, basically 4 or 5 more episodes to go. So a lot can happen. And I'm really curious on where they're going to take this into season 2 and beyond. And of course, if you guys watch right here, we're going to continue to review every episode of the show. Now, of course, next Monday, and I'll probably make the announcement at the end of the show too, we're going to switch gears and go back to the High Republic series, because the next issue might be coming out pretty soon. We don't want to get too far behind that, and I think we're going to be doing issue 5, I think is where we're at now. So be sure to watch for that. But What would you say for overall thoughts then? You know, like final thoughts on
Overall
the show.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Final thoughts. I give this episode an A. I'm in finals time right now at work,
I
so
was gonna
I feel
say
like I should
most
be
people
handing
do
out
number
grades.
systems. You're doing like a grading system. That's very, very
Well,
teacher like.
I'll give this one an A. I think it was really well done. Great surprise, great story. The humor was perfect, and then the emotional content was spot on, and it was well rounded, and it gave us a good cliffhanger too.
And
So.
Get Record also actually wants to correct us. He says actually there's 16 episodes, which means we're almost at the
Getting even
halfway
more.
point.
Right then, yeah. Got two.
Yeah.
Well, we got one more to go. Then we'll be
Well,
at the
that's still
halfway
less
point.
than
That's
Clone Wars, because Clone Wars would always be like 22 or 24. They're like a
22.
real, like the old style
Yeah.
TV seasons.
Got a TV show. Yeah.
And it really is difficult to keep track of this stuff now in our defense, because everything has, this show will have like 6. I just told Daryl the other day, last night I was binge watching WandaVision because I finally decided to break down and watch it because I saw the first episode of Loki and I thought it was really good. Checked out WandaVision because I knew it was going to be kind of interesting and weird. I love that. Now I'm watching The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So, but again, WandaVision's got like 9 episodes. Falcon and Winter Soldier has like 6. So these seasons are kind of all over the place. Cobra Kai's got like what? Usually like 10.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and speaking of which, Get Record rates this episode 10 out of 10. So Ronaldo,
Well,
you
of course,
gotta.
it featured his favorite character.
Well,
of course
yeah.
it does.
Yeah, I guess when you're basically naming yourself after the character, I guess that is going to be the one. But no, I would agree with that. Actually, I would give this one a solid 10 as well. Again, I only had a few of the little problems with it. If I have to convert it into the letter grade, I'll give it an A. I'll give it an A because, again, the stuff that I have a slight issue with is just minor. I mean, it's just trivial minor stuff. It's usually storytelling devices that I'm just a little bit weary of seeing. But it's nothing against this episode. It fits perfectly in the episode. I fully concede that there's nothing really out of place. Ronaldo gives his thing, he gives it a 7 out of 10, which means there's room for improvement. See, that'd be like the teacher version of like needs help or something. But again, I just think it was a really strong episode, and once again, it demonstrates why the show is really good. It gives you a good balance of comedy, but they don't overdo it. It gives you emotion. It's firmly putting you in the environment and in the circumstances of where we're at in this universe now, which is something that's never really been explored. And this is something you always get a little bit nervous about because they can mess it up. And you're hoping that they don't mess something like this up because it's very important. When the Empire is formed and you're seeing how this thing is transitioning from the way people are used to living in the Republic to the way they now live in the Empire, that's a really important piece of Star Wars history that you cannot screw up. You can't really afford to mess it up. So I'm glad that they're doing it in the way that they're doing it. And like any good show, it makes me look forward to the next episode. So with that, I think that's going to pretty much wrap us up for tonight. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you haven't done so already, because it does help the channel. And after all, we like to see that. We also love to see everybody subscribing, because that way you guys can get notified about when we're doing some other stuff. So, of course, speaking of that, hit that notification bell so you'll know whenever we put out new content, because now that we have a little bit more time in the summer, we're probably going to do a few extra videos. Plus, we're live every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. So definitely don't miss that. The schedule might be a little shaky. I'm going to have to go out of town, but I'm still going to try to have us on, though. Still going to try to keep up with the schedule. Because after all, this is my favorite time to get to talk Star Wars with Daryl and all you guys. So be sure to check us out. Not sure what we're talking about this Friday. If we
Nope, but it's coming.
we'll figure it out. So just make sure you join us Friday. And then next Monday, like I said, we're going to review the High Republic issue number 5. Pretty sure it's number 5. But whatever the latest issue is, that's what we're reviewing. So I think with that, we're going to wish you guys a good night. And I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.